All right. Hello, YouTube. It's time for a little fishing update for the Eastern Sierra, and let's talk about the fishing outlook for this fall. We will have a winter outlook video sometime in probably late November. We'll start talking about what's going to happen through the winter, but let's get into it for this fall. What is going on up there in the Eastern Sierra? Well, let's talk about the most important thing right out of the gate here is that the hatcheries are back online. That's right. So in case you haven't heard, there were some viruses going around for the trout hatcheries in the Eastern Sierra and in other parts of the state that was affecting the trout plants in a major way up there in the Eastern Sierra. So the trout planting has suffered some pretty heavy hits in some of the areas. We'll talk about what areas haven't been suffering in this video, but for right now, they're back online. They're starting to barely plant from some of those hatcheries. They're doing the best they can to hurry up. They know that they're lagging big time, and they've been talking about being able to do some pretty good plants by this fall. So this fall, like between basically now and the closer of November 15th, there's going to be quite a bit of planting going on. So the fish won't be very big. They said they're still sub-catchable for the most part, but they're looking to have some 10 and 12-inch fish to be planted. Now, that might not be good to be caught this year, but it could mean by next year, next summer, if those fish are surviving well, which in most of the waters in the Sierra, they're going to survive. But with that level of fish going in there, it's going to mean for some really good fishing next year. So it's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing at all. So the only hatchery not online right now is the Mojave hatchery, I guess, is still having problems. So we'll have to see, hopefully they'll fix that. But all the Eastern Sierra is looking good, guys. So let's start out over here. What's going on for Lone Pine? They still have the sand trap locations, and it looks like the water levels, while affected, it's definitely low, but some of the major drainages are not as affected. And what do I mean by a major drainage? Well, there's a lot of little sub drainages and canyons. Let's go over here and we'll switch over to a more of a terrain feature. I guess this one will do. Let's back out a little bit. There we go. So you can see the major canyons. Now, right here with Lone Pine Canyon here, you can see it's a major drainage. It holds water from multiple canyons that funnel into one canyon. So it's really coming down to water in the area. So like Lone Pine Creek right here has, how many lakes do you see feeding it? All these little lakes feeding into this one canyon. So plenty of water going on for these lower creeks. So the issue here has been stocked fish, and some of these have suffered. One of them this fall that's going to suffer, I think, at least initially, maybe late winter they might pick up, is Diaz Lake. Typically they start to plant Diaz Lake in October, and they would do some really big plants here. I don't see that happening this year. They might put in, one plant or so in the early fall, but the fish are going to be small. In the history and past times, they would plant some really nice fish here in the fall the brood stock and stuff from the hatcheries would get dumped here. But not this year. I think this year it's going to be, at least it's going to start out in the fall as a bad little timing for Diaz Lake. So if you're headed northbound, don't count on finding too many fish there at Diaz. There's just not enough fish to go around for this area. But Lone Pine Creek, a lot of the, sand trap locations along Lone Pine Creek here, and Tuttle Creek and all these small creeks in here, they're going to suffer. The reason why, because of the hatchery issues, but also heavy pressure from the road. Now, there was a post not long ago where they were talking about a the Southern Sierra was basically gathering money up, the county was, and to plant it, to buy fish, just like they have for other areas, to buy a good amount of fish from out of the area to plant in here. Now, the only issue was it's not a lot of fish. It's basically enough to keep it going. So what does that mean? Well, that means that the areas that are more accessible were getting the fish. So you're not going to see widespread plants, in some of the more remote areas. But the Southern Sierra running from basically Bishop down to Lone Pine, there's a few spots in here that were receiving regular plants. And the sand traps would have been some of them. They did plant, I think Lone Pine Creek got one of them. And I believe, what was it, the other one over here? There's one other sand trap that they were talking about in there. But for the most part, the sand traps weren't getting it. So what was getting the plants? Well, it was the Owens River area. So, for example, right here in Big Pine, you can see the Owens River crosses over right here. You can fish it. Let's drop in right here and show you. So there's the bridge right here. This spot right here was getting fish as part of that plant, the out of the state plants that they bought fish, and they were getting it in here. So spots like this were getting fish. So basically the Southern Sierra is going to suffer a little bit because they're not getting the frequency of fish that, they would get if the DFG was, or Department of Fish and Wildlife were planting it. And they said they're really working hard. I think next year you're going to see a lot of fish. So next opener is going to be really good for the Southern Sierra. But right now they're highly dependent on those supplemental fish from other states, and it's just not that good right now. But there are options. Some of the more major spots along 395 that have been getting plants in the past will be getting them. And most of those, like I said, are connected to the Owens River. So hit all the plant points along the Owens River, and you should do pretty well on both holdover and planted fish. Now, speaking of holdover, the Owens River is just loaded with fish, guys. It's the Owens River has been receiving fish for 100 years, and in the last 30 or 40 years, they've just been receiving thousands and thousands of pounds. Now, a lot of those fish wash down here. There's wild brown trout populations all the way down, basically from Pleasant Valley Reservoir and south. There's a ton of fish in this river shed still. So definitely worth exploring. If you have a four-wheel drive vehicle or you just like walking a lot, I recommend coming into these spots here along the Owens and going all the way down the river and just fishing different spots. It's a very popular thing to do, and it's worth it. There's even some areas where you can kayak down the Owens River, so something to look at. So here in Bishop, you have another stable population, the wild trout section of the Owens that starts over here at the monument. The monument is really close to this Happy Boulders area. There's a monument right in here. So from here south is not a special regulations area, but from there up to the bridge up here is. So there's a stretch of wild trout here, and there's a small area in here where it's not wild trout, and then there's another area below the dam here that is special regulations, a very small sliver that is. So that is been mostly fishing pretty well. It's a good spot. It's not a good place to focus your entire trip, but it's a great spot to stop over either on your way up or on your way down back home. Definitely some worthwhile fishing in here. Nothing big. You're never going to see anything big out of here, but you will see some nice looking brown trout and some wild bows in there. So that's a bonus. So right up here in Bishop Creek Canyon, let's talk about that. So Bishop Creek Canyon is a major stopping point for a lot of people in vacation. Historically, it would get probably the majority of attention maybe only tying or second to Mammoth at some point. But right now, it's really, really struggling. I know Jared over at Parchers has been trying to get fish planted, but they can only do so much, and like I said, some of that alliance money, when they kind of got together and put some money together to plant, a lot of that went into Bishop Creek Canyon, and they were planting a little bit in here. But, while they were planting, it was just a little bit. They basically had to share a truckload of fish all through this canyon. So while it was nice and it benefited a few people, but that basically was gone in a hurry. So those fish just, if you were there the weekend they planted it, you were doing great. But after that, it was probably dead. So there are lots of holdovers in both South Lake and in Sabrina, as well as above Sabrina over here at North Lake. There are fish in there. There's always going to be holdover fish in there. But it's just tougher. It's a tougher time. They're not getting, just a year or two ago, they were getting fish every week, and sometimes multiple times a week. So it's suffering. Where to focus here is Bishop Creek itself. There's a lot of remote sections that you can walk and a lot of really hidden pools and stuff. There's a lot of fish in Bishop Creek, and people definitely do not fish that. There's access points all along the river here. Now, some of it seems like it's really far away from the highway, and it might be, but there are walking trails. See, here you go, Big Trees Campground. You can walk through here. There's some parts where you can park and fish along Bishop Creek for quite a while. There's campgrounds all through here. And, that's what these are basically, is access points. Just don't park in the campgrounds to do that type of fishing. But there are spots along here that are completely legal to fish that go overlooked. So if you're looking for some remote fishing in Bishop Creek, definitely worthwhile. And I would say go for it. So moving on, Pleasant Valley Reservoir, probably the most stable fishery. This lake has been such a reliable source of fish for so long, and it still is. There's still, like, some of the plants that have gone in with that alliance fishing plants that they just had. This is one of the lakes that was getting those fish. So definitely worthwhile. This fall is a great time to try to hit it. This canyon is brutal hot in the summertime, and they still plant those, so it's worth it. Now, right now, they've been doing, it's actually happening right now. They're blowing out the canyon above Bishop Creek in this area. So this whole gorge, they've been hammering this with water. They're trying to flush it out. They're using the drought as a good time to flush this whole part of the canyon out. So from the dam here all the way to PBR. So a lot of silt and crap coming downstream. So I would say in the next couple weeks, maybe even just the next week, it might be a little bit rough there. There might be a little cloudy in the lake, but you're going to see quite a bit of water coming into this area, and that actually is not a bad thing. A lot of cooler water. It's just going to be a little silty at first, but once that settles, you're going to see some good aeration, and I think the fishing is going to really pop off here at Pleasant Valley this fall. So definitely worthwhile this fall. If you're up there and you're struggling for fish, stop off at Pleasant Valley Reservoir. There's entrances on both the north and the south side down here by the dam. If you're unfamiliar, let me zoom in real quick for you. If you're unfamiliar, you can park up here at this power plant right there. You can park, and then there's parking right here below the dam, and you got to walk I wouldn't even say it's a quarter mile, but it's a little bit of an uphill walk. If you have trouble walking, it's definitely not a good place for you. It's kind of a steep hill, but for the most part, a lot of people ride bikes here at Pleasant Valley Reservoir. They love riding bikes, and that's a great little thing to do in the winter. Actually, it's quite pleasant to ride a bike through there. So what's going on at Crowley Lake? Well, Crowley is probably one of your most stable fisheries in the Eastern Sierra by far. It has been struggling getting plants just like everywhere else, but it really doesn't need them. There's a huge population of holdover fish here, and just in the last couple weeks, it is really turning on there. Crowley fishing has been on fire right now, and it's only going to get better as the temperatures cool down. And they are going to be lowering this lake level, so look for the fishing to be focused more on this north side and in the deeper side of the lake. So this whole west side is going to suffer a little bit. So this basically all the fishing is going to be in this center part of the lake. And that's going to be where the concentration of fish is going to be best. So look for that. But Crowley's great. If you're headed up there this fall, this is definitely something you need to be on the list for. Now, access points are a little tough. They have Crowley Fish Camp down here at the South Landing. But hey, it's a private landing, so they do have the ability to charge you. I'm not a big fan of this place. I really do not like it, but it is an option. You can access it. It gives you access to some of the creek inlets over here. But there are other places. You don't need to pay to fish the shoreline. You can come across on the other side of the dam here. There's actually all kinds of access over here, all this access. Just understand that some of this can require a four-wheel drive vehicle to get to where you can access it. So if you're driving a car, drive to where you can and then walk the rest, and you should be okay. Up here on the North Shore, same situation. See Whitmore Hot Springs right here. You can drive out and access these spots along this area, and I highly recommend you do it. Float tubing is awesome. If you can float tube here, definitely do it. It's a great way to get a bunch of fish here. But again, four-wheel drive is the way to go. So definitely worthwhile. So moving on. And this is a long one, guys, so strap in. Make sure you have a little soda or something. We skipped a little bit right there. Make sure you guys are prepared, because we got a lot to talk about here. We're not going to be done for a little while. So we are going to go in order of the mountain pass. So if you're interested in a certain area, just fast forward until you get there, and you'll be there. Rock Creek has been receiving some of these fish, supplemental fish that have been planted from out of state. And surprisingly, last year, Rock Creek was absolute trash. This year, they've been actually doing very well. So I put Rock Creek Lake on my list of places to hit this fall. It is definitely going to be worthwhile. I think that you're going to see some decent fishing here, at least through the fall. I don't know about next spring. It might require some plants next spring before it gets going. But for right now, there is a decent population of fish in here, and it's been fishing pretty well. So moving northbound over to Convict Lake, probably one of the most major fisheries in the Eastern Sierra, at least one of the more well-known ones. And you know what? It's had a good year. It's had a very good year here at Convict. I have a video on where to fish it. And by the way, if you liked my series of where to fish and whatever lake you want to list there, I'm going to be updating all of those lakes and and even adding some more. So stay tuned to the channel. Make sure you're subscribed for that, because we're going to do some major updates on that stuff. But Crowley Lake, fishing very well. Put it on your list. Definitely worth getting there and throwing some lures and some bait out there. They've been catching some nice fish over there at Crowley. So good job to the resort there, because I know they've had a hand in that. So moving up to Mammoth Lakes. So what's going on in Mammoth? They've been low on population with tourism lately because of the fires. So what does that mean? It means that the fish that they do have in there have been sitting there quite lonely because no one's up there fishing it. So definitely worth hitting the Mammoth area. Now, which lakes would you hit if I don't know which ones to go to? Well, Lake Mary right here in the middle this lake right here is super, super good. This is the one where they consistently plant the most fish. Of course, there's Lake George right above it here, and the twin lake right here below Lake Mary. So Lake Mary and Twin Lakes and Lake Mamie is all really one lake, but they divided it up. A lot of people don't know, but Lake Mamie here and Mary used to be just one lake right here. They actually put this dirt in here to separate it a long time ago and to give it like a pathway across. I think Google Maps is in the snow here. No, they finally updated it. Good. So right here in the divide right here, there's some parking and stuff like that along here. Down here, you can't park here, but down this way, there's some parking, and there's little trails that go in between. So if that's something that interests you, definitely go check it out. This looks like this was either really late fall, like right before it froze over here, and it was closed down for the season. So, but yeah, there's definitely worthwhile fishing here at Lake Mamie and Mary. So Mammoth is fishing great. They're supporting it. They're putting money in it. It's all supplemental, and pretty soon Fish and Game will be dumping their fish in here. There's always Mammoth Creek, again, a lot like Bishop Creek, been getting fish for many years, and there's a decent holdover population. So do your research there. This isn't the video for it, but there are some holdover populations in Mammoth Creek. It's been planted a very, very long time. So moving up to June Lake Loop, probably one of the first major areas that has actually been consistent over the last few years. June Lake is fishing really well. Gull made a big comeback this year. This fall, I think gull is going to be a great option to fish for the fall. So definitely, if you're in the area, don't just fish just June Lake. Definitely stop over at Gull. From shore, there's access points on both the south shore right here. There's a little road right here. This is an access point right here in the middle, and there's some spots along the campground side. The marina is a little stingy about their shoreline over here, so don't be surprised if you're fishing over here if you get booted. There is a couple public spots along this other side, and they just basically say, we're not going to enforce other people's properties, but don't be on ours, basically is what they'll say to you. But yeah, there's a couple of spots over here along the community park side that you can fish. But I highly recommend, if you can, get on the water here at Gull. It's a really good lake to tube, to get a boat. It's pretty fun, definitely worthwhile. So June Lake, same thing. South Shore has been fishing the best, this area here. And some people have struggled. I've seen quite a few YouTube videos where they're not getting anything here, but trust me, there are fish in this lake, and it's worthwhile. You just got to know the lake and do your due diligence here, and you will catch fish. This lake is a tough one. June Lake is one of those lakes where the fish have options. There's several different habitats there. So just pulling over and going down to the water may not produce for you. You definitely need to know the lake if you want to catch some fish there. So learn the lake. So Silver Lake, one of these places that has been consistently getting private plants. Not as much noise coming out of here. I think there might have been some complaints that they were getting more fish than other places last year. But this year, there's not as much. Last year, man, there was a lot of huge fish being planted and caught here. This year, not as much. But there is still good action here. It's definitely worthwhile, especially from the shore. Let me show you what I'm talking about. There's quite a few access points right here on the road. If you look around, you can see, I mean, you're right next to the highway. And there are, doesn't look like it, but there's parking spots all through here. And a lot of people park right down there and along this road here. But it's good. It's worth it. This is actually a very telling photo. It looks like a very wavy, windy day, and that's accurate. This lake gets a lot of wind, especially in the fall. It gets really cold and windy here. So be prepared for that, especially late in the day. This lake, it can whip here in the afternoon. So don't be surprised if you go and it's blown out. But 100% worth fishing. So here we are at Rush Creek, right here below the dam here, all the way. This is all wild trout fishing in here. It's not designated a wild trout fishery, but it is loaded with wild trout because they have the lakes that they can go in and spawn, Bold Silver and up here at Grant Lake. And they run up and down in those creeks, and there's some nice fish in there. Moving along, obviously, right in here to Grant Lake. Grant Lake is really low on water, very low, but nevertheless, there's still water. If you go there now, what you're going to find is this sandbar that you see right here that is barely exposed. This is heavily exposed now. You could drive pretty much to about right here now, and there's just a small amount of water flowing from the creek through here. It's been particularly fishing pretty well in this area right here by float tube or kayak, getting on the water. This is the first area you would want to target, is off of this cliff area. And then the main pool, of course. I would be, if you have a kayak, I would definitely cruise this whole outer shoreline and fish it. Now, what about this east side of the lake, this mysterious east side of Grant Lake that nobody ever fishes? Requires four-wheel drive. That's the problem. A lot of people just don't have it. And you can see, you got to go quite far on that road to access it. But there are options, and you can get it. You can go there. A lot of people access. I've actually taken a car over here many times. Probably not the best idea, but you can fish it. And Grant Lake, I'm going to tell you guys, is one of the biggest sleepers in the Sierra. I say it every time I do these updates. I give a lot of credit to Grant Lake. I'm telling you, there's a state record fish in this lake. I think one day in the next 10 years, somebody's going to pull a 20-pound fish out of this lake, and everybody's going to be like just shocked. But I'm not going to be shocked. I think there are some monster fish in Grant, and they're going to start showing up in the next few years. So we're going to skip all the smaller stuff in here. Moving on just above near Lee Vining here. There's let's move over to Lundy Lake. Lundy has had an awesome year. They have been planting the absolute crap out of this lake this year. Super good year. There's a lot of YouTube coverage on it, and they've been planting over here on the inlet side. They plant here, and what happens is the water is down. It does not look like this in the satellite photo. The water is way down here, but there's still quite a bit. And the flow, the annual flows coming out of here is really good. Just don't forget that they draw from this lake. This is a heavy draw on the water for the Owens. You know, basically LADWP owns the water coming out of here. But there is great flow coming out of this lake. And you're going to see some good fishing here if you stop off this fall. 100% worth the stop off. So moving northbound, let's go to Little Virginia and talk about what's going to happen there, because a lot of people have been wondering how that's been fishing. So right on the other side of Lundy, literally on the other side of the valley here, is Little Virginia and Big Virginia lakes. They call it Big Valley Lake, but it's actually Big Virginia. I don't know why they don't change that on Google, but anyway, been fishing well. Both of these lakes have been getting those supplemental fish, as well as Trumbull here. Trumbull in this corner right here has also been getting some of those fish. So definitely put this on your fall radar. Great spot between now and the closer to hit. It's unknown how much more. Let me get a drink here. It's unknown how much more fish they're going to get, but they are getting plants. And I'm definitely going to stop here on my trips this fall. I think it's going to be one of the better one of the better spots. So Little Virginia, the only problem with Little Virginia is as the fall comes, the resort here is real stingy with their parking. They do not, this parking lot right here, even when they're open, they charge people to park here. Now, the Forest Service has no requirement to do that, but they always say, well, it's for customers and such. But the reality is, guys, is it's just the access point to this lake. And it's unfortunate the Forest Service hasn't said, listen, we're designating this area as a parking lot to the lake, but they don't. They've allowed the resort to charge. So there is a fee to park here. If you don't want to pay the fee, you got to park here. So here is the main parking lot. You could see on this day it was quite full. And to do that, then you got to walk down the trails, basically the goat trails down to the lake here and access it. Or you could backtrack on the road. You can see there's a trail right here that cuts through, and then you can go down the lake. That's another option there. This lake is over 9,000 feet up. So if you're not in shape, all that walking and stuff is going to be tough for you. So I would recommend even dropping your gear off and then driving and parking if you can. If not, then just fish Big Virginia Lake, and you're right here. You can park here, and wham, you got a whole lake for you. And it's pretty good. So that's the story there. Definitely, like I said, worth fishing. There's even some great hiking here. There's some backcountry lakes that you can access. Some of the better easy hiking in the Eastern Sierra to visit backcountry lakes. And I highly recommend it. It's just such a great area to visit. So moving north, we're in Bridgeport now, Bridgeport Reservoir. I think this is fall fishing ground zero right here, Bridgeport Reservoir. They've been getting some great fish right now, particularly right now here in mid-late September. It's been fishing awesome. There's still basically 2 months of fishing left here, 2 more months. The closer is on the 15th. And I think it's only going to get better as time goes on. There's a ton of fish in here. Last fall was kind of rough. It was a rough fall. And the spring was tough as well. They had a lot of wind in the early spring this last opener, but it should be okay this fall. I think it's going to be a good spot. So moving over to Robinson Creek, they've been planting this whole creek really well. Look for good fishing there, and I think you're going to be very happy with what you find there. It's one of the creek sheds up here that they've been planting really well, just like Twin Lakes, Upper and Lower Twin. Awesome. These are some good holdover spots. I think you're going to see this is going to be another ground zero for this fall, particularly the South Twin Lake. Lots of shore access here, tons of shore access. And I think you're really going to enjoy fishing here. It could get really windy if you remember my video from last year, and you will see why I think it's going to be windy. This place gets super windy in the fall, but the fishing is phenomenal. There's some monsters. This is where the lake records for the Eastern Sierra and some of the state records have been produced as out of these two lakes right here. So look for that to continue. You're going to see some big fish coming out of here that fall. I think in October, you're going to see some in the 20-pound range out of Lower Twin. So the Walker River, what's going on there? Well, the flows are low and the water temps are up. But they're looking for the temps to be cool enough real soon to start fishing this area. And why did the temps matter? Well, if you fish it and you catch fish when the temps are up, the fish are very stressed. It's hard to get them to resuscitate in warm water because there's low oxygen. So they're just kind of asking, it's not against the law. It's just they're asking people to avoid fishing it until the temps cool down. But by the time this video is released, it should be good. So starting in late September, basically, this will all be back online and there's a good wild trout population there. Just make sure you're following the regulations. It's barbless artificials. So it isn't flies only, as opposed to what a lot of fly fishermen will have you believe. You can use other lures. Just make sure they're barbless. That's the key. So moving over, one of the most overlooked areas is the Walker River, the West Walker River, from basically Sonora Junction here. The river joins it right here and runs all through this canyon. Let's move back over to a terrain. So yeah, right through here, all this is fishable. This whole canyon is loaded with fish. And let's drop down in there and take a look at it. We should be able to see a little bit of the river. Yeah, so right down there, it looks a little dry right there, but it's not. It flows really well all year long. Let's see if we can get on the other side. Sometimes it'll allow you to click on the other side. No, not this time. But anyway, yeah, right in this canyon, tons of fishing spots. Now, you just have to basically drive down the canyon and look. I mean, the stocking points are going to be obvious. They're not going to walk a quarter mile to stock fish. So look for close access points from the highway to the river, and you'll likely find some decent fish. I've been receiving a lot of intel from this area that it's been pretty good and highly underfished. Now, why is it highly underfished? Because most people don't drive this far north. It's pretty far along on the Eastern Sierra side. So you can see it's way up here, a good hour north of Mammoth at least. So, but I think it's worth it. If you're in the Bridgeport area, definitely stop off and fish it. So that's going to be it, guys. That's it. We've covered the whole Sierra range. There are some smaller lakes, obviously, and some smaller spots that we didn't talk about. But that's because they're not part of the main show. And some of those spots just don't need to be blown up on the internet. But hey, if you need tips and you're looking for that stuff, obviously, again, that's why I do Patreon. So you're looking for some more tips on this stuff. Always visit me on Patreon, and we'll get those questions answered. So in short, I think it's going to be a great fall, and I think you're going to have some great options to fish. There's going to be a lot of good plants going in. Next year is more exciting, but I think I wouldn't avoid it this fall. It's going to be a little smoky, but I think the fishing is going to be pretty good. So get your family and gather them up and get up there. It's going to be great, guys. The weather's already cooling down. You got temps in the 30s and stuff up there now already. So it's going to be good. I think it's going to be good, and I'm excited for the trip. So if you're seeing this, it means I'm probably already up there. So look for some Eastern Sierra action here on the channel. Over on Patreon, look for those updates from each of those lakes, and we'll see you guys soon. All right, we're out of here. Get out there and fish. Thanks for watching.